you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do read it, you're misinformed. What is the long-term effect of too much information?
Information, I just need some information. I've been dying. Is it lack of education? I've been reading without any transformation. I'm addicted. Is it overstimulation? Hey.
Welcome to the Sixth Sense Report.
Take a look, it's in a book. It's Typebeast, baby.
Man, it's unfortunate that this is the second time we're doing this book, but it's the first time for the audience.
Oh yeah, right.
This is the one lost tape that we got.
Yeah. No, it happens with podcasting, right? Sometimes you lose a file or two, but this is a long time.
It's gonna be better. It's gonna be better than.
Yes, it's going to be better than what we originally recorded because we have a special guest who knows his stuff about financial literacy. He's been on the show before. Please welcome Seun Adeyemi.
Hey guys, how you doing? Nice to be back on again.
Yep.
Forward to
First
chat.
time generational wealth and race, episode 33, and then you and your bro coming through on our NSARS episode.
NSARS did really well, actually.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Remember
I mean,
that.
I'm sure their audiences had a little help for that.
Yeah. No. The NSARS commentary from Sho and Seun was really good.
It's amazing how times have changed. A lot's happened between now and then.
Yeah, for sure.
Time flies when you're having fun, right?
Absolutely.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Sort of. I mean, but yeah. So to our audience, today we're gonna be digging into the classic book, "Rich Dad, Poor Dad" by Robert Kiyosaki. Right, and so we're gonna structure it by going through chapter 2, which is why teach financial literacy. Chapter 4. Was it
5.
chapter 4, Joe?
Chapter 5.
5. The rich invent money, and then 8,
Getting started.
which is getting started.
Which is really his 10 philosophies of let's say getting started. So I guess the question for everybody around the table would be when did you read this book, or how long ago did you read this book the first time?
Well,
Sean, we can start with you.
I read this book probably like 14 years ago, right before I joined the industry, before I became a financial advisor. So what, 07, 08?
Wow.
Man,
What at the time, what would have been your biggest takeaway?
I think that my biggest takeaway at that time was the whole thing with assets and liabilities, right? And we'll get into it. We'll get into it more, but it's just helping you think through just decisions you make on a daily and how you're taught one thing in school, but real life is different.
What about you, Darnell? What do you remember how long ago you read it?
It was a while back. But definitely a game changer. And then after that, of course, we did a type beast on why A students work for C students and B students work for the government.
I don't know if we did a type beast on it, but you reference it all the time. It's basically like we did a type beast.
Oh wow. Okay. I didn't realize that. But yeah, that book came after Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and the why A students work for C students. That book was like about teaching financial literacy in the school system. And so for me as a teacher, I'm thinking like, even the title, you're like, oh, A students work for C students. What the heck does that mean? Well, A students work for capitalists, right? That was his kind of idea, and that true financial literacy is capitalism. And since the school's against it, it was really good. And I would argue that his work has definitely changed my life. I try to incorporate it in everything I do. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about this with Sean and you, Joe.
Yeah, and just you've already referenced a couple other books, but if you look, like I look in the beginning of his book, he's got like 10, 15 books that all say best-selling books. So he's got a number of works. I think Rich Dad Poor Dad's probably his most popular.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Also, I would add, I also have his board game, Rat Race.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
I have the board game Rat Race, which is really good. It takes practice though. You got you got to practice at it, and making wise decisions and trying to get out the rat race.
You mean cash flow?
Yeah, I was gonna say I
Cash
think
flow.
it's called
It's
cash
cash
flow, but
flow.
Rat
Yeah.
Race is the concept of
It's
the game.
yeah.
Yeah. So cash flow. So the idea is, you're in a rat race, this inner circle, and then you got to make up enough passive income to get out of that into the like kind of like the retired life, the life
Mhm.
that you want to live versus being
Mhm.
forced to work and working because you choose to. So it's really
Mhm.
good. So yeah. How about you,
Uh,
Joel?
you're a full student of this man with the game. The game is a very, like, I want to buy it because I just actually listened to the audiobook again the last couple days. I found it on YouTube. I'll put it in the show notes page. It's probably sticking around. I was listening on a couple times speed, and he brings up the game as a way for people to have fun, but also learn these concepts in
Mhm.
somewhat of a
Practice.
exactly, in a practical manner.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So even for me, like it was helpful because I like to push the limits. That's how my learning for my
Mhm.
learning, I like to push the limits to see what's possible, what's not possible.
Mm,
So I'm always trying to aim high, and my wife is always trying to keep it, stay safe. So we always play together and laugh at each other, and
that's
me and
good.
her really enjoy playing it. So yeah.
I
Yeah,
think it's a game
I
I'm
think
probably gonna get for my
Yeah.
say
Get
for
that.
I
my
know.
Get
kids.
that.
Yeah. I think for me, I think I read it for like probably just after we started this podcast, so 4 years ago. Um, and I think there's a one line in there that I've repeated over and over again, especially from a real estate perspective to people. And that is, you make money when you buy, not when you sell. And so it's such
Mm.
a, you know, concept that if you get it, it makes all the difference in terms of the way you approach investing, right? You're
Mhm.
investing because you know something is a good value and I'm going to make money on it eventually because I'm buying it based on the value or undervalue compared to the price,
Mhm.
right? As opposed to I make money, like obviously I don't make the money until I sell it, but the profit component is determined based on what when I buy. Is really
Yep.
the approach. And so for
Mhm.
those, how many people that at the peak of booms are still buying thinking they're making money because why? They don't have that principle in part of them. And people that I think utilize his approach of investing and make money when I buy actually do much better at the
Mhm.
end of booms because they recognize, hey, I got to hold on. I'm better off holding cash because the buying opportunities are coming. Because the crash is when everything goes on sale. But anyways, I'll save that till we get into the book a little bit more. Um, so, and I think Sean, your point about assets and liabilities, I think for me, what's funny is I got it right away, but I think so. Traditionally, an asset is something that you purchase and it represents something you own. And again, I'm using more
Mhm.
technical accounting terms. And a liability is something you owe. But he uses a more layman's principle of an asset is something that generates cash, and a
Money for
liability
you.
is something that creates an obligation for you to pay.
Mhm.
And I think from a wealth creation perspective, those definitions are much more important than let's call it a technical accounting definition. Um, and so, I mean, Shayon, you already referenced that as something that was meaningful to you, but I think the timing of it is amazing considering the industry you moved into and how has
Yeah.
that approach shaped even your role as an advisor.
I think it's one of those things that it's contrarian in the sense that when I'm talking to clients and they're talking about the homes being an asset, I'm like, no, 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 no. It's not an asset if it's not generating you any income. But it's worth X amount of, and I'm like, yeah, it's worth that, but only if you sell it. And if you sell it, where you're gonna live. So it's not really an asset. I think your home can become an asset if you learn how to monetize it, and we can talk about that a little um, longer in the show, and how some of the investors we've worked with started with like a small little townhouse, and now they own about 5, 6 properties and counting. But for the home to become an asset, like the paradigm shit had to change to say, okay, yes, it's an asset, but until you do something about it other than just living in it, it's not an asset because it's not generating you income. And I think when I read the book, it's one of those things that got my mind churning, 14 years ago, because when I was thinking about going into law school, and I started looking at the amount of debt I was going to accumulate for going to law school, and I'm like, "Okay, no offense to lawyers, but what are they earning when they get out of school?" And I looked at the income they're earning, and I look at the amount of debt they're carrying, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense for me. There's got to be something better. And so reading the book began to make me think outside the box. And as God will have it, that's when I stumbled into finance, and the rest is history.
And so, just quickly tell us about a bit about your work in True Wealth.
So as a financial planner, what I do is basically almost what he does, is in terms of teach people how to earn, teach people how to make money, teach people how to grow their wealth. Um, and funny enough, one of the things we've been working on, I've been working on with a lot of my clients, especially in the last 3, 4 years, is using real estate as a means to build your net worth. Um, the Everybody knows how the Canadian market has been the last maybe 10 years. And I'm so glad that I'm blessed with the kind of clients I have, but I'm also blessed that the clients I have, most of them listen to me, because when everybody's jumping into the market is not necessarily the right time to jump into the market. Like I've been saying this for like 3, 4 years. This market is overvalued. This market is overvalued. Something's got to give.
Wait, sorry. Which market is overvalued?
The
The
real
Canadian?
estate market, the Canadian
Which
real
one? The
estate
Canadian?
market,
Okay.
the
Okay. Just
Canadian real
just to
estate.
be clear, just in case people are listening and thinking.
Yeah, that's
you
right.
know.
That's right. The Canadian real estate market is overvalued. It's overvalued. Yes, you can find value here and there, but by and large, um, you're buying a highly inflated asset that, unless that asset is generating income from you from the jump, it's not an asset. Because if you're buying it with the idea that I'm going to flip it because house prices are going like crazy,
House prices
you
always go up.
exactly right. House prices always go up, which is not true. And it's one tool I've been trying to teach, that I teach my clients, is just because it's been like that for the last 5 years, 8 years, historically, the real estate market has only brought in maybe 6% annual return average when you
Mhm.
look at it. But the key, and this is one thing the book brings out, is cash flow, right? And just like Joel said, you make money on the buy, not necessarily on the sell. But the reverse is the case with many people trying to jump into the real estate, at least the Canadian real estate market, is okay, they're buying it at inflated prices. And yes, you may be lucky, you sell, you make a profit. But as he talks about, taxes and all of that eats a huge portion of your profits. And those who bought in February, they bought a falling knife, in the sense that if you were buying it to flip it
Yeah,
in
Feb
6 months,
2022 as a timestamp
yeah,
was the peak
yeah,
in on what dropped 20% since then.
yeah, yeah. And some places have even dropped a lot more. Like Toronto GTA has dropped dramatically. Um, but again, if you're buying it, if an investor is buying it, okay, I'm buying this for cash flow. Yes, it's amazing that I can make a profit when I sell it. But if the idea is I'm buying it to earn cash flow, it doesn't matter what the real estate market is doing. It doesn't matter whether it goes up or goes down. As long as I'm
Mhm.
making money on an
Mhm.
annual basis from that property, I'm in the money. Because eventually, as the market grows up, I can even decide I'm going to hold that property and leverage it to get a few more, which is what we've done for some of my clients that have 6, 7 properties. Is we started at one, but then there's a mindset shift that has to happen from, yeah, my house is an asset, my house is an asset. Yes, it is, only if you can figure out how to use it to generate cash flow. You're
Mhm.
living in it doesn't make it an asset.
So, okay, in regards to your clients and generating passive income with their real estate, is it Canadian real estate
Canadian,
or
yeah,
American?
Canadian real estate at this point.
Have you considered American real estate?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Um, I am in the U.S. right now. It's one of the reasons why I'm in the U.S. right now is
Mhm.
looking for opportunities, because for a while I knew the Canadian market was highly inflated, especially the GTA.
Mhm.
Um, but the U.S. market is, for the prices that we have in Canada, you can get a whole lot more in the U.S. But even
Can you get
outside
can
of
you can you
GT,
give our listeners a little example, like just small numbers
so
wise?
so you can think of a four bedroom detached house that would go for $1 million, 1.2, well, maybe 1.2 at the peak, but maybe like $1 million in the GTA. You can get that in Florida for like 450, 400,000,
American
right?
in the US.
American in the
So
US.
let's say 550 American, or sorry, 550 Canadian for what he's talking about in the US, to about a million in Toronto.
About
So
a million in
roughly
Toronto,
double the price for the
double
same
the
thing.
price. Now factor in the fact that in terms of rental, it's about the same thing, right? So if you think if the same four-bedroom is rented out, I can rent that property out and probably earn 2,500, give or take, here in the US for that very same property. But if I bought that property for 400,000 US, my mortgage is much smaller, right?
Mhm.
My
Right.
mortgage is much
Right.
smaller. So my margins and my cash flow when I rent that property is much higher than a property that I get for $1 million in Canada. And at the very least, if you buy it at 20% down, so I have an $800,000 mortgage. At today's rates, $800,000 mortgage is probably
Dude, at
4,000.
6%, that's 4,800, 48,000
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
year.
No. For about 4,800.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't even break. It's hard to break even unless I have a multi-unit property where I can rent out the top and rent out the basements
Yes.
and maximize cash flow. But that's not always possible, depending on how the house is built, unless you put in more money to make that kind of work. But the whole point is you make money on the buy, not necessarily the sell,
Mhm.
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, and
Be-
the problem with that comment is if you're only looking in one market, you lose the perspective. So if you are in Toronto and you're only looking in Toronto and your attitude is I make money when I buy, compared to, let's say, the rest of Canada, but compared to North America, you need to be finding the places that have an undervalue in a relative sense, right? But if you're only looking in the GTA, even the thing that's relatively undervalued in the GTA is a garbage investment compared to the undervalued in North Dakota. Like,
if, Even if we stay in Canada,
yeah.
Edmonton prices
Mm-hmm.
have bottomed out a lot. So I know a lot of friends who've moved from the GTA, Toronto, to like Calgary, Edmonton, because they like, I can't keep pace with the cost of living here and the cost of
Yep.
houses.
Yeah.
And right, so almost the same property they would get for 800,000 in GTA, they're getting for 350, 400,000 in
Mm-hmm.
Calgary. And
Yep.
it's not as if the rental market is any different. Yes, the rent may be a bit more expensive in the GTA, but it's not $400,000 more expensive.
It's not double.
It's not double, right? So it's finding value. And I've I've learned, almost kind of retrained my mind to not follow the herd. There's this herd mentality that it's only going to go up, or you got to get into the market, and so there's
Fear of missing
FOMO.
out. Yeah.
Exactly, right? There's this, oh, I gotta get in, I gotta get in. I'm like, slow your rolls, slow your horses. You are going to get yourself burned. And I know clients who've, not personal client, but I know stories people who've got burned because you don't understand what an asset is and what's a liability. If I buy that property and I cannot rent it out to at least even break even, it's a liability.
Yeah, it's going to cost me money every month.
It's going to cost me money every month. Worse off, if the market value now drops, like in this market that we're in, not only am I losing money on a monthly basis from a cash flow perspective, I'm losing money if I decide I want to offload that.
Right.
Or if I get caught refinancing and have to throw money at it if I don't sell it.
Yeah.
I think, Sean, you were telling me about the book, The Wealthy Renter. Was it you?
It might have been me. I think it was.
Have you've read the book though?
I haven't read the whole book. I just kind of skimmed through it.
Okay, but I think you told me about it.
But it's basically, there's this idea that the only way, and see, there are people fall into in different camps. There are people that say the only way to grow and become wealthy is to buy real estate. And there are people that say the only way to grow wealthy is to invest your money in the stock market. And I say, why not both? Right? You have some people that, especially who live in the GTA, because of their work, they can't move outside GTA. They want to buy, but they cannot afford to buy. So what do I tell them? I say, listen, you don't have to live in the house you buy. You can start off as a landlord, go buy a property in Calgary, go buy way back 4 years ago before Brantford became like a big craze. I had clients buying real estate in Brantford, Ontario. Back then, I remember one of the first investors we got in there, they got their rental property for $200,000. No kidding. Fully detached.
It's probably 450
2-bedroom.
now.
It's 450 now. But they're not thinking of selling, but they've made money over and over again on that. And I said, you don't have to, you live in the GTA, you cannot afford a house here. But if you want to get in the market, you can get in the market as a landlord first and begin to gain cash flow and understand, okay,
doing it remote.
Exactly, right? Be a landlord.
Especially with the way rental, people sort of understand rental restrictions. If you've been a renter in the same property for 10 years, you're laughing right now because your rent is half of the market rate. Right? But if you move, you now don't have those because essentially the landlord has the general restriction. And I know it doesn't apply to all properties, but most ignorant landlords just go, okay, whatever the rent control restrictions are, i.e., I can only raise it 2% a year. That's all that ends up happening. So right now, you could be renting for $1,000 a month, but if you went and tried to find a new place, it's $1,800.
It's $1,800 a month, $2,000 a month.
As a tenant, this person bought a rental property, but they're keeping the rent sort of, let's call it, at the old rent rates, and which makes sort of what this strategy even more advantageous.
Yeah, that's good. So then I guess what are we transitioning into the rich invent money?
Before we do, I just wanted to point out one thing that I think is helpful. Partway through chapter 2, I'll say in my version of the book, which has it's a 20-year version or something, on page 86, 87, and 88, he shows the cash flow patterns of a poor person, a middle-class person, and a rich person. And it's just so telling. And I think I'll skip the middle-class one because it's a little bit complicated. But for the poor person, it's income and pays your expenses, and that's it. Basically, the idea of you living paycheck to paycheck. You have no balance sheet, right? You have no assets. You have no liabilities. You just have income and expenses. The rich person pays all of their expenses out of their assets.
Yeah.
Right.
And the middle class basically has the, mortgage liabilities piece, but no assets. But I think if you can really understand this cash flow piece, and you start to understand that as a perspective, you start to understand the objective is grow your assets so that my monthly expenses are covered. Really, the idea, I think someone referenced retirement earlier, but really that concept there is called financial freedom. When your assets pay your monthly expenses, you have the financial freedom. I could quit my job tomorrow because I'm not stuck paying my mortgage out of my salary and I have no choice. I can't afford to quit. I can't afford to move. I can't afford whatever. That's really, I think, where understanding that perspective from this financial literacy chapter, I think is so important, because it changes your mindset towards investing, not just, am I going to have this goose egg or nest egg for retirement?
Okay. Can we transition into chapter 5?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's transition in this way, because the chapter is called "The Rich Invent Money." I think like we are, as grown men and with families, and also being in the Lord, right? Like we have a responsibility to our families and to God to make sure that we're being responsible and to maximize the time that we have. And so it's important, I think, that especially as Christian men, to do right, not just by our immediate family, the women we married, the kids we have, but also our parents as they get older. And I felt like that my hand is being forced, even though I traditionally am not like a financial literacy guy. I love my mom and dad dearly. I love my wife's mom and dad dearly, and I want to be able to, do right by them. Therefore, I don't have a choice. I have to become a financial literacy guy. Or become financially literate, and I have to invent money. I got to find a way to better manage my money and invent money. So like for us, let's get into that conversation about what it looks like to invent money.
I think he gave many good ideas in the book when talked about sometimes making money is not just about your profession and what you learned to do in school and working a job. It's about thinking outside the box. It's about getting creative. It's amazing how many people in even just the last 2 years have, with everything that has happened in the world and work going mostly remote, many people, the smart ones, have actually made a whole lot of money in this market. I mean, something as simple as, okay, when the whole mask mandate came in and stuff, and some smart people, what they started doing is that they got into the mask business, and before you know it, because masks became a thing, even though it was just for what, a year, 2 years or thereabout, they made money and they moved on to something else. And so when he talks about the rich inventing money, it's about finding creative ways to make money outside of the regular box that we're told to get a job, work overtime, or get another job. Is You'd be surprised um, how much opportunities are there, especially in today's day of technology and internet and the world being global and being able to um, work anywhere. I mean, for instance, I'm in the U.S. now, but my work is primarily in Canada, and we're in a generation that these opportunities did not even exist 10 years ago. So when he talks about the rich inventing money, he's finding solutions in the marketplace today and figuring out how to monetize that.
Well, and I think a piece that goes really well with that is he talks about two kinds of investors in partway through this chapter, and I think his analogy is really, really good that he uses to explain it. So the first and most common type of an investor is someone who buys a packaged investment, whether that be a mutual fund, some sort of real estate REIT, a stock, or a bond. And his analogy is essentially someone who goes to a computer store and just buys a computer right off the shelf, versus the second type of an investor, which is what he's really talking about, those who invent money, is one who creates investments. And in the computer analogy, the idea is that person bought all of the components of the computer and built it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And really that's where the inventing of money comes into play, because you're coordinating all of these pieces is where you potentially have the opportunity to make money out of thin air.
Mm-hmm.
And so a simple example would be the idea of like you bought a piece of land, but then wholesaled it. So you bought the land for 10 grand, but you wholesaled it for 25, and you might have done that in a matter of 5 days and made 15 grand out of thin air. But really what you did was you took an investment and put the package together for someone else to walk away with it.
Yeah, because the reality is that most people are not trained to think about what happened before you got the finished product, whether that's your phone, whether that's a water bottle. Like there's so many analogies that we tend to think in finished products, but the person who made money wasn't necessarily the person who sold the phone, but the person who put together all the pieces and everything that goes into the phone. And so once we begin to think creatively as to what ideas can I put together and looking at the marketplace, I always say that is you've got to get a pulse. And it's one of the tools of the things he says, understand the marketplace, is read and learn and know what's going on. What are people looking for? What are people asking for? What are people using? And how can you put together the pieces to bring something to the marketplace?
So I think the one thing for someone who hasn't read the book, if they're hearing this conversation, they're like, okay, but I have no idea. How would I ever do that? And one of the things he talks about in the book is the idea of like learning a formula for creating an investment portfolio. So he used the example of, I think, tax liens in a particular province. There's a story in the book where he basically goes to like a seminar, learns the process, and then he goes and finds the person in the like city who actually works for the office and ends up taking them out for lunch for like the last part of his like investment investigation. But the idea was he found the formula and studied it, learned it, and then just implemented it over and over and sort of perfected that formula for creating an investment. So as much as we've been talking about creating an investment opportunity, you're not recreating the wheel. You're taking things that are out there, methods that people are already employing. A great example would be the concept that you've sort of referenced already a little bit, that you have house hacking where you rent out the basement floor and live in the top floor, right? That's an example of creating the investment. You go and study and learn. And what was step one of that example would be most likely they're going to say to you, spend the money to make it so that your rental unit is in tip-top shape so that you're not worrying about fixing something every other month, right? So move into the property and make that rental unit close to perfection, not perfect, but good enough that everything is well running so that you don't have to think about it. But that's an example where you go and you learn and you study, how are other people doing this? And then you implement that formula. So as much as we're talking about creating an investment, you're not creating it out of thin air based on, the backyard idea you had while smoking a cigar and it just came to you out of nowhere.
The first one is usually the hardest, right? Is okay, learning that formula the very first time, and you're going to take your lumps, and that's okay. Sometimes it's not so much the money you even make on the first one, is the knowledge that you learn. Even taking the concept of tax lien, I have a guy who, and I know even Rich Dad, he mentioned this in the book, but he didn't go into it much more. But he talked about my friend. He goes, there's a list of houses that the owners are owing years of taxes, and the government wants to collect, and the government puts a lien against the property. So what this guy does, he buys the list and he approaches the owners and says, I'm going to pay off your taxes, and all I need to do is you put me on title for X percentage of your home. Most of these homeowners, they either lose their house or at least they get a portion of the house. Of course, they're going to do that. So he pays off the tax lien, and now all of a sudden he's a co-owner of the property. And over time, he can then decide, okay, the original owner wants to buy out. He wants to move out, or something happens. He buys them out. He owns the property, and all of a sudden now he's generating even more cash flow than he was before. Now, this may sound a little cruel, but that's the real world. That's what's going on. And so he takes these opportunities, he finds these opportunities and goes to these people and say, I'm gonna help you pay. You owe $10,000 in taxes. I got you. I'll pay you. I'll pay your tax. I'll pay off your property taxes, but I own 40% of your property. And just taking ideas like that. And so the property that would otherwise, if he had to go into the marketplace to buy for 300,000, his bought in at the original owner's price of 100,000 or whatever they bought it. It cost him what, $10,000 or 20 or whatever whatever it cost him to pay off the taxes on that house so the government can take off the lien. That's his investment in the house. So he basically bought the house for the cost of the tax payment he made, and now he's a co-owner on that property. And then the original owner says, I want to sell the house. He says, okay, you can sell the house to me. I'll buy it because I know that I can turn that property into a cash flow. He buys that property. Let's say the new market value is 300,000. Well, I already own 50% of it. So I'll buy your own $150,000 portion. It's okay. I'll buy it. So he buys the other guy out. Now he owns the property fair and square. He's taking a $150,000 loan to own the house completely. But when you look at it, a house that was worth 300,000, how much did he pay for it? Right? It's taking those ideas and beginning to think outside the box of just your regular job of working 9 to 5 and working extra time. Not that those things are bad, and I don't want anybody to hear that. Those things are good, but how can you supplement that to begin to create assets that generate income that over time can give you the financial freedom you're looking for?
But I think we should. It's about that time to move on to the next section of the book. But when you first started, you're the section of what you just said. You made a comment about how difficult it is to make the first step to implement that new strategy the first time. And when I was listening to the ebook, or the audiobook, sorry, again, I picked up something I didn't really pick up the first time I went through, how much he talks about fear. So so much of this book is pointing out like that people make decisions based on fear. And so, when I talked about the two types of investors, the first type of an investor is more fear-based. So I just want the simple solution that again, go to what I said originally. It's sort of aiming towards the idea of I got my nest egg and I'm going to retire. That's the strategy of that first investor that I mentioned. But that's a little bit more fear-based approach. You're not willing to risk anything. But again, that's how you end up in the rat race your whole life, going back to the cash flow game reference. So the getting started section, as I said, is his 10 philosophies. There's one philosophy that I can touch back to the section that we just finished on. Right after his piece about the two types of investors and creating an investment, the last point that he has there is organizing smart people. And he basically, the part I want to touch on in this chapter is he talks about paying your advisors well, or I think it's bullet 6, pay your brokers well, the power of good advice. And so in the chapter we were just in, he's talking about organizing smart people. You need your lawyer, you need your real estate broker, these people have specialized knowledge. Leverage
you need your Sean Adeyemi.
Yes. But also pay for that advice, because it's not just advice, it's also time. Right? Like if I can pay someone that I trust to do this part of the work for me, that means I know I don't have to worry about it. And I don't have to spend the time to become the expert and make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed.
And one of the things he actually mentions a lot is the rich dad was the one with the least education, but then he had all these people, accountants and lawyers, who were pretty much at his beck and call.
He was the C student, and all the A students were working for him.
Right? But the idea there, though, was he had a team of people he trusted who gave him advice on certain things. You don't have to be the best at everything. You just need to be good at one or two things and really own the space, and the rest of it you can farm it out. You can build trusted people that can build what you're looking for.
Yep.
Having good advisors around you, whether that's a good accountant, a good financial planner, a good realtor, a good business guy. Like, one of the things I've been privileged is to have um, amazing people around me who, have you checked out this idea? Have you checked out this idea? How can we make this work? They don't say no. They don't say it's not possible. They say, how can we make it possible?
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's what that's what you pay them for. It's not so much the what they do for you, is the knowledge, the wealth of knowledge they have to the possibilities that are available.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. I was going to say the idea of, outsourcing, division of labor, and not trying to take on too much. Even when you talked about doing remote real estate, and you can live in the GTA and have a place in Edmonton. But then you would have to find a property manager and someone to
Hmm.
manage, especially, you know what I mean? Like, not
Yeah, you ain't
everybody.
flying out to fix a toilet.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You know what I mean? So right. So you kind of have to get used to the idea of using your interpersonal skills and building relationships with people,
Hmm.
interviewing, hiring people, and then doing the math on, okay, well, I pay this guy, and making sure that there's still some kind of cash flow for you after you pay all the people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
mean, if we're talking strictly on just looking at real estate, the number of people it takes to process a transaction, from a solicitor to the accountant, and even though I may pay my lawyer to do the closing for me, when I pay my lawyer, I know that there are things that he's looking out for me when I'm buying that property, right? I've had an offer for a seller, and the lawyer points out, or even the realtor points out, well, why don't you? I'll give you an example. I bought an investment property with somebody a few years ago. They were basically brand new, never done it before. But going in, because I had bought a few properties, I had an idea of some of the things I needed to do. One of the things we ended up doing that saved us money was we got the seller to pay off the water heater, which had I think $100 monthly payments on it, and he ended up paying that, um, as part of negotiating the price of the house. We had him pay off the water heater because I didn't want to take on that expense. And something as
Mhm.
small as that may not seem like a big deal. It's just $100, but it's not just $100. If 2 years in after buying that investment property, that heater breaks, I've got to come up with the cost of it. But I know that when this property, I know that he had just bought that water heater. I know it came with a monthly payment. That monthly payment affects my monthly cash flow. But I was able to negotiate that into the purchase price of the property we purchased.
Mhm.
And so, but I knew to do this because I've done it a few times,
Mhm.
right? And so sometimes when you partner up with the right people, it's not just the money you save, it's not just the money you spend on the outsets. You pay them to complete a transaction for you. Is the access they gives you, is what I don't want to say loopholes, but it's the ways to f- to fine tune that opportunity and make it even better.
Yep. Avoid leaving money on the table because the knowledge base is not yours. You've leveraged the team around you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Joel, can you read the rest of the list that you have there?
Sure.
Just for
The
the
bullet.
listeners.
Yeah. For the 10 points on this chapter. So take note of number 4. I already technically mentioned it, but so number 1, find a reason greater than reality, the power of spirit. So he's talking about, you might want to be financially free, but like what are your motivations
Hmm.
rather than, oh, I just need money.
Yep. Yep.
Make
Taking care of family.
exactly what you had said, right? As to motivation to be a provider, but not just monthly. So number 2, make daily choices, the power of choice. Number 3, choose friends carefully, the power of association. Number 4, this is the one I master a formula and then learn a new one, the power of learning quickly. Number 5, and I want to come back to this one, pay yourself first, the power of self-discipline. Number 6, pay your brokers well, the power of good advice. 7, be a Indian giver, the power of getting something for nothing.
Oh man,
I
how
know.
old is this book? How old is this book, man? Oh man, cancel this guy, man.
So for his case, let's the first sentence of this number 7 is the term Indian giver arose out of a cultural misunderstanding when the first European settlers came to the New World. If a settler was cold, an Indian would give the person a blanket. The settler mistook it for a gift and was often offended when the Indian asked for it back. So he's explaining the term, but the point is, which I think is great, he used an anecdotal story to make his point, which is the power of getting something for nothing.
And sorry. And so he's saying, don't be an Indian giver.
No, be an Indian giver.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So the power of getting something for nothing. And then 8, use assets to buy luxuries, the power of focus. 9, choose heroes, i.e., idols or people to look up to, the power of myth. 10, teach and you shall receive.
Sorry, myth.
The power of myth. So mythology, or like, looking up to people as the, idolizing them in the sense of, things to strive for. And then number 10, teach and you shall receive, the power of giving. So, and that's, he touches on tithing and, so from the Christian ethic, he references his father tithing and seeing the value in giving as a means of also,
getting.
Well, but also like, what does it do for you as, just the environment that it's cultivating too. So the reason I want to come back to number 5 is he talks about paying yourself first. And I think that concept is so important, but it also ties into the power of self-discipline. And which is the second part of that. But when he says pay yourself first, he actually spends a lot of time being like, okay, I'm not suggesting you need to neglect your bills. But if you have a target of, okay, I'm going to pay myself 10%, let's say, of my salary towards savings, i.e., I'm building my asset portfolio with 10% of my salary every month. He's saying take that first. And I think the method there is that it actually becomes a catalyst for self-discipline, because you recognize that investing in yourself is the priority. So because I've prioritized that, well, now I'm not going to go out for lunch as much, or now I'm not going to spend money on my monthly expenses that I have a little bit of discretion on, because I've prioritized investing in myself.
And so that 10% you would use to invest in something.
I just use 10% as a a number, but the idea is if you committing to that, but similar to the way that Christians would talk about giving to your church out of your first fruits rather than your last fruits. I've prioritized investing. And so now the things that because I've prioritized paying myself first, I now am cultivating a discipline in the rest of my spending.
And I think many of us actually miss out on that one point, that first one of paying yourself first, because the average person gets a raise, and you would think that with the raise they would be able to save more, but the reverse actually happens. They save less because their lifestyle automatically increases with the raise. But what then I realize is that human beings, we have an innate ability to adapt, and you can use that to your advantage, right? Like when you pay yourself first, now you have less to live with. But what ends up happening is that you force yourself to live on that less, because you need to survive. And so you automatically, without realizing, you find ways to cut back because you've taken out that savings. So you've done two things. You're building the habit, but two, you've also retrained your mind to live on less.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I think that the second part of that is also when you need more, go back to rich invent money, right? Like you strive to pick up the difference because you're like, no, I got to pay myself first. So in order to pay myself first, I gotta go make more money. I gotta find another opportunity.
Like one of the things my wife.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, one of the things I love my wife, what she always talks about, is when she comes up with things, ideas, and although I'm a business guy, I'm an investor. Sometimes when it comes to my family, I'm like, okay, I got to be very careful, a bit more conservative. And she's like, you're the financial guy. Don't tell me no. Let's figure out a way to make it work. Right? But that's the truth. Is don't say I cannot afford it. Is say how can we afford it? And there's a point actually related to that, which is verse 8. I want to kind of talk on that, is using assets to buy luxuries instead of the power of focus. It kind of ties into one because there's a discipline aspect that comes with once I start paying myself first. I create this discipline also that I don't just go out spending on luxuries, right? If I can create assets. I mean, I'll give you this classic example. Many of my clients who want to buy new cars, or you need a new car every so often. I say, you know what? Let's wait. We have this rental property. In a few years, this rental property is going to be worth X. At this point, um, even if we decide we're going to use this rental property as a leverage to buy a car, the rental property is generating you cash. So the cost for that car is not coming from your own hard earned sweat. It's coming from a rental property you own. But most people don't understand the concept of that. I remember I even had this guy come to me, makes good money, okay? But he drives the nicest car and he has a lot of debt. And I said, you're financing a car. And between his wife and himself, they were paying about $1,500 in car payments a month. No joke, $1,500 a month. And I said, do you realize with your income, you can qualify for a mortgage of about, between you and your wife, about $1 million? Do you realize the leverage your income gives you? But unfortunately, right now, you've tied your income to a car payment, which is a depreciating asset. What if we flip that, use your income to leverage it to help you get real estate, which can then begin to generate assets for you that you can then turn around and say, yeah, I can buy this car rather than using your hard earned monthly income to finance this car. That was like a light bulb moment for him. But those are some of the things that um, opportunities are there if you know what you're doing and if you stick to these principles.
And just to the final point to that is it might take you 3 years longer to get that car, but now you're it's not costing you. It's not coming out of your pocket. It's coming out of your asset portfolio. Right? It's that cost is already covered. I could quit my job and I still have that car payment covered. In theory. So and he talks about that example exactly like that in the book. You know, something essentially I wanted to buy this luxury car. Okay, we created a plan. It took us 3 years to get there because we wanted to create the asset to pay for it first. And obviously, it's, if you think of it as like a car payment scenario, when the car's paid off, I still have the income. So now I can go do something else with that income.
Yeah.
Right. So it's also in the long term, you become way better off. And in the short term, you know, you've covered your costs.
We haven't even talked compounded interest and what that does.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think we've hashed out the book quite a bit, but considering the times we find ourselves in, Sean, maybe you can speak to, you know, people being a little bit anxious. I mean, I think you already touched a little bit on holding cash. But yeah, how can, if I use some big questions or some big thoughts to think through, how has history prepare us? How does history prepare us for events like this? How can we protect our wealth with the troubling or the unknowns that we see in front of us because of, as we've talked about, the Canadian housing market being at such a high place, although it's come down, potentially there's room to go lower. And then I guess the last thing, sort of, I'm assuming, some good financial habits would probably be a good way to weather some of these storms. So maybe you can speak to those things a little bit for our audience and, parting advice a little bit.
I think one of the things I always try to tell my clients is your liabilities, pay down your liabilities as best as possible. Because in a market correction with job loss and the markets where they are, the more liabilities you have, the more you're going to feel the pinch when it happens. And so liabilities is, you have your mortgage, you pay down your mortgage. You have a car payment, do whatever you can to get rid of that car payment. And Rich Dad talked about the guy that invests and the guy that saves. If you can find ways in your room, in your budget, to leverage your savings to acquire assets. Now, right now, based on the Canadian market, I don't think is the best time to buy. I mean, well, let me rephrase that. I think there's still room for the market to correct. So I still personally believe that we haven't seen the bottom yet. I think with the next rate hike, probably next month, there's still maybe another 10% or so, maybe 15 that we're going to see in the markets for at least the Canadian real estate markets to come down. So those who have cash, I say, keep your cash invested in a good, when I say high interest savings accounts, liquid enough that you can use it to buy assets, but not necessarily in the whole portfolio should not be in stocks. I think you should diversify. I think you should own different basket of stocks, but I think there should be a portion that you want to leave in a fairly liquid investment that you still earn a return, even though it's not great. But the point of that bucket is to be able to move when the opportunities present itself. And I think right now, there are a lot of opportunities coming up over the next few weeks and next few months. And the other part I also add is make it a habit to invest monthly, a portion of your cash, a portion of your savings. Because even though you cannot time the market, time in the market is what's going to help you win. And we already talked about some of the other ones, like paying yourself first. Take that when you earn your income, take 5% off the top, 8% off the top, and just put it away, invest it, and leverage your income to build assets. Because your income is, at least at this point, your income can possibly help you acquire assets that you otherwise would not be able to once that income is no longer there.
That's good. That's good.
So, Sean, if the listeners are trying to get a hold of you, where can they find you?
Check out my website, truewealthadvisors.ca. You can find me on Twitter. I am Sho Adeyemi, CFP. You can find me on Instagram. I am Sho Adeyemi, CFP. And yeah, send me a message.
Cool. I'll make sure to put all that in the show notes page so they don't have to figure out the spelling. It'll be in there, make it easy on them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, Sean.
Yeah, thank you. Again, always appreciate your perspective, and I'm sure our audience will appreciate it as well.
No problem. Always my pleasure. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks.
But you heard me? Does that make sense?
Madden and Mitchell Media.